If a cow eats one blade of grass in her lifetime, she's a grass-fed cow. This is not about saving time, it's about saving your life.
Welcome to Wellness, your ultimate guide to unlocking your full human potential through biohacking. I'm your host, Ashley Deely. I'm a certified sports nutrition coach, former personal trainer, and Pilates instructor, and I have a degree in kinesiology. My goal is to help you improve and elevate the quality of your life. When you leave a review, it makes a positive difference. Whether you're listening on Spotify, watching on YouTube, or listening on any other streaming app, it helps listeners just like you find this hidden health information faster. If you're using Bluetooth headphones, it's time to upgrade your health. Bluetooth headphones are constantly emitting EMFs, and the International Agency for Research on Cancer classified them as a Group 2B carcinogen. They can cause headaches, fatigue, ringing in the ears, tinnitus, and even fertility issues. Thankfully, there's a lot of ways to reduce your exposure. The first one is to stop using Bluetooth headphones. The headphones I use are unlike any regular headphones because they use a hollow air tube between the speaker and the earbud. These headphones also work with any adapter, and they have a handy microphone as well as a pause and play button for you to take calls and listen to music or podcasts. To find out which headphones I'm talking about, visit ashleydeely.com/headphones. That's ashleydeely.com/headphones, so you can stop using Bluetooth and upgrade your listening activities. Today's guest is the most famous farmer in the world, Joel Salatin. Joel is the author of 16 books, a room full of debate trophies, and a thriving multi-generational farm. Joel has spent a lifetime blending food, farming, and philosophy into performances which inspire audiences worldwide. He co-owns Polyface Farm in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, made famous in The Omnivore's Dilemma and the documentary Food, Inc. Today, it supplies thousands of families and restaurants with pasture-raised regenerative meats and products. Whether in the pasture or on a stage, his mission is clear: to champion local regenerative food systems and challenge the way we think about farming. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. It's wonderful to be with you.
I am thrilled to have you here, especially because of the profound work that you've done and that you're doing. But for listeners hearing about you for the first time, can you please give us an overview of your background?
Sure. So my mom and dad bought a property here in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia in 1961 when I was only 4 years old. And so I grew up here, and it was the most worn out, gullied rock pile that you could imagine. It was very, very cheap, and so got it moved in. And Dad was an accountant, Mom was a school teacher. Dad wanted to farm full time and sought counsel for a couple of years from both government and private sources. How do I make a living on this little farm? And the advice was all buy chemicals, plant corn, build silos, borrow money, graze the woodlot, all that. Well, my grandfather, his dad, had been a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening Farming magazine when it came out in like 1945. So he grew up, understanding compost piles and things like that. And he looked at the chemical approach as basically a drug addiction. And he knew that wasn't right. And he saw it, as a drug addiction. And so anyway, he got a job in town as an accountant. And on the side, we worked on the farm. He was a very visionary. We did a lot of experimenting. And eventually came to the idea that fertility doesn't come out of a chemical bag. It comes from decomposing things. All ecologies have animals. Animals aren't sedentary. They move, which means you have to have mobile shelter and infrastructure. You have to have mobile water. And the fertility comes from decomposing carbon or, digesting carbon. And finally, it's all about the ideal food system is one that's as close as possible to where you have a shorter chain of command or a shorter chain of custody between the farm and the plate. And so and as a small farm, we had to wear the middleman hats in order to make money because because in a commodity business, the margins are so slim that you have to produce at huge scale in order to make money. And so we weren't at a large scale, so we wanted to have a large margin, which meant we had to get retail dollar for everything. So we had to process, distribute, and market what we produced. And so that kind of created the foundational philosophy, if you will, going forward, I came back to the farm. So now I grow up, I'm wanting to farm. And how do I get back on here? So through high school, I'm thinking about this. And then I worked at the newspaper on the weekends in high school. They liked me. They said, well, when you get out of college, come back and we'll get you on the staff. Well, that suddenly gave me an in to be able to live at home and do the town commute thing. And so after college, I came back, got on the newspaper, and how do I get back on this farm? How do I get back on this farm? Well, Teresa and I got married. The greatest decision I ever made was marrying a lady who is more frugal than I am. And so we lived on $300 a month. She canned 800 quarts of stuff out of the garden every year. We ate out of our own garden. We never went out to eat. We never went on vacation. We never went anywhere. We didn't have a TV. Still don't have a TV. And I don't even have a smartphone. I've never used a QR code. Never texted. Never received a text. And never used an app. So here we are. We're driving a $50 car. We have Daniel, our first child, and cloth diapers. We never even had a baby bottle, and just had the little food mill, went with us, and whatever we ate, kids ate. And so point is that within 2 years, we were able to save enough that we could live for 1 year without a salary. And so September 24, 1982, I walked out of that newspaper office to farm full time. I didn't think we would make it, but I was hoping that we would be close enough that a year at the farm full time would cut my time away from, maybe 15 to 12 or 12 to 8 or, something. And as it turned out, we never looked back. It was tight, 3 years. I always say it took us 3 years to be able to exhale, okay, we're going to make it. And that was it. That was at the 3-year level. And today the farm generates more than $5 million. We have 22 full-time salaries from the farm, and we service thousands and thousands of families. And it's been a blessing beyond anything that I can ever imagine.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that background story. I loved hearing it. And I love hearing that you don't have a TV, that you don't have a smartphone. But Joel, I'm dying to know, what makes you the most famous farmer in the world?
I have a gift of communication. And, in every vocation, the storytellers lead their vocation. And so, in high school, I didn't play sports. In fact, my mom was a health and phys ed teacher, a high school phys ed teacher. So my older brother was very athletic, and I was what you call a late bloomer. I was a pudgy 12-year-old, wore husky clothes and all this stuff. And so anyway, I didn't make the 7th grade baseball team, and then I didn't make the 8th grade basketball team. And I remember looking at that list, and my name was not on it, and making a decision. That's the last time I'm going to try out for an athletic team. I excel at writing and speaking, so I'm going to put all my effort in writing and speaking. And so I joined the debate club. I was the lead in all the drama, the theater plays, forensics, public speaking, all that stuff, all through high school and college, and honed that gift of communication to why am I the most famous is because I'm a storyteller, and have sharpened that gift and that talent of storytelling. So when moms come up to me with their little, 8-year-old, 9-year-old in tow and say, my little Johnny wants to be a farmer, what should he do? I tell her, join the local theater club. Learn how to tell stories. The how-to, the actual production, how to move a cow, gut a chicken, that sort of thing. That's relatively simple. What takes an incredible amount of gifting is figuring out how to sell the chicken, how to sell the beef, how to message your soul's passion to attract people to your mission.
What's one of your favorite farming stories?
Oh my goodness. Well, again, good or bad. I mean, there's good ones and there's bad ones,
It's anything you want to share.
Yeah, so here's one that was just profound. So I'm out walking in the field one day. I was, I don't know, 20, this is 50 years ago, and I'm really getting interested in the farm and the health of the farm, the soil. We're starting to see some soil progress, fertility. The farm was so worn out that I mean, I could walk the whole place as a little child. I could walk the whole farm and never set foot on a piece of vegetation. That's how barren it was. But through my, through Dad's experimenting, and as we started these processes, started seeing, progress coming on. Oh, I'm 18, 19, and we've got these books, weeds and what they tell, weeds, guardians of the soil. And we were covered with broom sedge and wild strawberries and dewberry vines. We call them ankle scratchers. So I looked in the book about strawberries and broom sedge and dewberry vines, and it all says calcium deficient. You're lacking calcium. You got to put on calcium. So okay, well, we didn't have enough money for calcium, so we just let it go. Well, but we started controlled grazing and moving stuff around and added chickens and things. And I'm walking through the field one day, and I see this big old clump of broom sedge, and right up through the middle of it is a little spindly red clover with a beautiful little red clover blossom on it. So I go to the bookshelf. I pull off the weed book, and I say, well, red clover. I mean, that's fantastic. What makes that grow? And it says red clover grows in very fertile, calcium saturated, balanced soils, And so here I am. I'm looking at this situation in a square foot. I've got this broom sedge, which is indicating low calcium and poverty, and this little red clover right up through the middle of it that is indicative of high fertility and high calcium. And Ashley, it dawned on me, because we didn't have money to spray things, spread things, and all that, I was enjoying being able to see the slow, incremental change in the soil health and biology over time, because I wasn't just going out, well, I don't like that, let's annihilate it. I don't like that, let's annihilate it. No, let's come in more gently with a massage mentality and let the biology change over time. And I got to see that change. Today, Ashley, there's not a single dewberry vine or a single broom sedge on the farm. Not one.
Oh.
Okay. But that incremental change happened in a slow enough that I was able to see it. And so for me, that's my ultimate farm story, is that in my lifetime, I have watched scarcity and impoverishment move to abundance and flourishing on a very large, hundreds of acres scale, and to be able to impact that, to touch that, to be able to walk out the back door and step into being immersed as hands and feet of creation stewardship, to be able to touch that creation in such a magnificent way.
That's a beautiful story. And now I'm very interested in learning more about soil, because I've heard that humans are doing soil a disservice. Can you speak about that?
Civilizationally, humans have not been very kind to their environment. Homer, who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, walked across what is today the Sahara Desert and said he never left the shade of a tree. The Sahara Desert is man-made. It's not natural. When you look back through what humans have done to the environment, it's not a good track record. And so I get the guilt and shame of the radical environmental movement of, oh no, I dare not touch the ecology because every time I touch it, I hurt it, so let's lock it. Let's get the humans off. Let's get the humans. So we have environmentalism by abandonment. Let's put it in a national park. Let's put it in a wilderness area. Let's lock it up in something that humans can't touch. And so in our own modern day, in 1837, when Justus von Liebig, the Austrian biochemist, with his vacuum tubes, determined and told the world that all life is simply a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, for the first time in human history, there was a worldwide move from life being fundamentally biological to life being fundamentally mechanical. And for the first time, humans embraced the idea that we can have life without death. That was a brand new thought on the spectrum of human history, which then brought us into the chemical fertilization age, where, okay, we don't need to have things decomposing, we can just manufacture artificial nitrogen, acidulated fertilizer, as chemical phosphorus and potassium. We don't even have to worry about trace minerals. We don't have to worry about molybdenum and boron and those kind of things. We just put on NPK and we'll be fine. And this really took off after World War II when we had stockpiles of NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, that were stockpiled for the war effort, because that's what you make bombs out of. And so we had all these stockpiles of cheap NPK paid for by the war effort that then became available to agriculture to spread on our fields. The problem is the soil is mechanical. It's fundamentally biological, with as many beings in a double handful of soil as there are people on the face of the earth. Think about that a minute. Billion with a B, not million, billion beings in double handful. And so what happened was we cheated the soil. Since NPK was developed, we have been systematically cheating the soil, not doing a carbon cycling, not doing a decomposition, life, death, decomposition, regeneration, life, death, decomposition, regeneration, but rather we've been cheating, giving artificials. And Sir Albert Howard, the godfather of modern aerobic composting, said in an agricultural testament in 1943, he said, when you use he called chemical fertilizers artificial manure. In other words, it's not authentic manure. He said, when you use artificial manure, you make artificial soils that grow artificial plants that make artificial animals that feed artificial people who can only be kept alive with artificials. That was in 1943.
Wow.
That connects that dot, and the only way that we can get back to a true nutrient-satiated diet is to start with a nutrient-satiated soil that is getting the full cornucopia of microbes being fed by solar energy into biomass that is digested either through the digestive system of an animal or a microbe to actually feed the soil with its full panoply of eclectic diversity.
Walk me through how you take care of your soil.
The first thing about the soil is you never want it naked. And so the first thing we do is try to never uncover it. And so whether, in a crop farm, you would do cover cropping. There are now many people that are doing crimping farming, pasture cropping. There are numerous ways to accomplish this, but essentially you practice a system that does not uncover the soil, where the soil is protected with vegetation. That's number one. Number two is that vegetation needs to cycle through a disturbance and recovery factor. We call this ecological exercise. So you want to harvest that vegetation, which stimulates a lot of humus and organic matter into the soil, with sloughed off roots, trying to bilaterally make symmetric the amount of material that's above ground and below ground. And you then give the plant a time to restart its growth cycle. So those are protocols that are used in our grazing program. So we move the cows every day to a new paddock. And so any one square yard may only have cows on it, for example, 5 or 6 days in a year. One day in early April, one day in May, one day in June, all right? And the rest of the time, it's all growing and accumulating biomass, going through its juvenile blaze of growth period to stimulate way, way more production. The other thing then is that we do multi-speciation. So we don't just have cows, we have chickens and turkeys and ducks and lambs and pigs. And the variety of speciation creates, each one of those manures and urines and animals has a different nutrient component. And so all that diverse digestion material brings an incredible amount of nutrient and microbial diversity to the landscape. And finally, we do large-scale composting. So whenever we house animals, we use a carbonaceous diaper. And so our fertilizer budget is a large wood chipper where we incorporate the biomass of the forest into the open land so that we're bringing the forest biomass integrated to the pastures via compost. But unlike most farmers, when they do large-scale composting, they make these windrow compost piles. We do that with pigs, and we inject the bedding with corn. The corn ferments in the bedding pack that's anaerobic due to the cow weight. The cows come out in the spring, we put in the pigs. The pigs then seek the fermented corn and churn it all up like a big egg beater and turn it from anaerobic to aerobic, and that becomes our fertilizer that we spread on the fields. So now the pigs aren't just bacon and pork chops. The pigs are co-laborers in a land healing ministry, which changes completely the emotional relationship that we have with the various co-laboring animals on the farm. And then we use symbiosis. So the cows, you look at nature, behind all herds of herbivores is birds. Birds follow herbivores, the Serengeti all over. And so we follow the cows. The cows are moved every day. And then we follow them with the eggmobiles. And the laying hens fan out, and they scratch through the cow patties, eat out the fly larvae, eat the crickets and the grasshoppers the cows have exposed, and act as a biological pasture sanitizer behind the cows, mimicking the biology that we see in the bird herbivore symbiotic relationship in nature.
Joel, it's my dream to live on a farm and buy some land, but I know not everyone can do that. So what kind of tips do you have for people at least creating a garden?
Sure. So the first thing is to find a source of carbon. Carbon is what drives everything. So carbon is anything that used to be alive. Leaves, wood chips, sawdust, cotton ginning trash, kitchen scraps, anything that used to be alive, bureaucrats, whatever. So anything that can decompose. All right. So find your source of carbon and then start small. You don't have to have something big. I love raised bed gardens because they're so child friendly. One of the problems with flush gardens is that your toddler is always going to walk through your cucumbers and your peppers, and it's going to be, and they're going to associate the garden with someplace they're not supposed to be. But because you're always fussing at them, get out of the green beans, okay? But if you go to a raised bed, then the toddler can be there with you, can enjoy the garden and all that stuff, and they're not going to be walking in it, and it's not a negative for them. And the raised bed gets you a very, very specific and definite square footage box. All right, this is it. And so, you can put that in your backyard, your front yard, wherever it is. I'm a big believer in edible landscaping. I mean, you can plant for the same amount of time and energy it takes to plant an ornamental tree or an ornamental shrub. You can put one that grows food. So, gradually replace your inedible landscaping with edible landscaping. And you can have a pear tree, an apple tree, some blackberries, currant berries, different things. I mean, thornless blackberries are wonderful. I mean, to pick blackberries without getting splinters is a wonderful thing. And so yeah, there's a lot that you can do. I mean, even on your porch, they now make so many cool urban gardening infrastructure, like an 8-inch diameter PVC pipe with pockets built in, and you can pack it with compost, and you can plant herbs in the pockets, and you have your own hanging herb garden along with your wind chimes on your porch. There's a tremendous amount of stuff that you can do in a backyard setting, including chickens and rabbits and honeybees.
I'm loving where this conversation is going. Do you have any tips and tricks once we get our own garden started?
Yeah, well, I mean, make it a raised bed. You have to have your carbon source and grow what you like. If you don't like rutabagas, don't grow rutabagas. Don't get enamored of exotics and weird stuff. Peppers are one of the easiest. Other things are, beets are really easy. Radishes are easy. You start getting into, things like kohlrabi and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower. Those get much, much more difficult. So start with something easy and start small. Too many people get overambitious and start way too big, and then it's too much to take care of. So it's much better to have a productive small space than a frustratingly unmaintained large space. So take your time, go small, and keep the ground covered. Get your carbon together so you have a constant mulch. a mulch on there, and that'll feed the soil, and you'll be up and running.
I also liked what you said about how if you're going to plant a decorative tree, you might as well plant a fruit bearing tree. And one of my near and dear friends to me said there should be more fruit trees all over America, and maybe we wouldn't have such a hunger problem.
About an urban setting and how many trees are, along the streetscape and the lawnscapes and things. All of those could be apples and peaches and pears and plums and all sorts of things. It wouldn't take any more time, attention, energy, to develop those trees than it does ornamentals. So yeah, I'm big on edible landscaping.
What can we do to make sure the bugs that we don't want aren't on our garden?
All the bugs are indicative of something either out of balance, either with you or in the neighborhood, or in the life cycle of something, the 17-year locust or whatever. So every bug has a life cycle, has a place where it reproduces, where it's vulnerable. I mean, like squash bugs, for example. They really only get on the plant if it's young. So Elliot Coleman, who's the guru of gardening, says cover your squash plants with polybond, like a remay. It's a woven poly, lets the air and water come through, but bugs not. And then when you see the first blossom, then take it off for pollination. But by that time, the plants are big enough and strong enough to withstand the squash bug drill. So there's a lot of timing. Potatoes, the Colorado potato beetle, you can plant those potatoes late in the season. I know you won't have the first potatoes of the season, but if you plant them late after the life cycle of the Colorado potato beetle has already come and gone, then you don't have to worry so much about them. So I mean, there are a million bugs and a million things. It's kind of like, how do you teach a kid to read? Well, every kid's got a situation. So just realize that you can raise food without chemicals. Sometimes your intervention will be physical. Sometimes it will be mineral. Sometimes it'll be a foliar application of. I had some sweet corn one time that was showing, white streaks in the leaves, which indicates magnesium deficiency. So I just went up and got some Epsom salts and mixed it up in a sprayer and sprayed them. And within 3 hours, the streaks were gone because the corn had absorbed the magnesium. That's what Epsom salts are, magnesium through its stomata in the leaves. Here's the point. The point is, if you're interested in something, you can find the answers. If you're not interested in it, all you can find is negatives and problems. Follow your desires, your interests, and I just finished with this. That the biggest lie in the world is thinking that we can have a different world, but nobody has to change, or at least I don't have to change. Well, if I want a different world, I've got to change. And this idea that I can continue doing what I'm doing and everybody else has to change, it doesn't get it done. And so, if you want a different outcome in your life, well, you need to have a different set of values. You might have to turn off Netflix for a year. You might have to cancel the Disney vacation for a year. I mean, to learn canning or go to a seminar on lactofermenting or how to milk a cow or whatever. All of these things are heritage skills that all our great grandmothers knew how to do, and we've now lost them. We know how to navigate TikTok, but we don't know the difference between a red oak and a white oak. And those were common. That was common knowledge, for our forebears. And so we've got to realize that we cannot have a different outcome without participating in the outcome we want to have.
I love the wisdom that you're sharing, Joel. And I do feel like a bad citizen of Earth because I don't know how to identify different trees and shrubs. And I'm still learning. And I remember when I first identified a milk thistle because I always called it a purple pokey. But Joel, how can we get back to nature?
Yeah. Well, you have to start. Well, first you have to get out in it. You have to get off your sofa, get out from in front of the screen. Americans spend, 8-9 hours a day in screen time. And so if you get out from in front of your screen and get outside, you'd be surprised what you'll start to, and then begin doing things. I mean, it's like cooking, you know. We all know people. I mean, we know people that, like, you go over there for dinner or something, and it looks like it just magically appears, you know, effortlessly. How do they put on this wonderful meal? You know, it's like they weren't even working. And how does that happen? And you know why? It's because they've practiced at it. You know, Dave Ramsey, the guru economist, says you tend to be successful at what you put attention on. And there's a lot of truth in that. You just tend to be successful at what you put attention on. So if you want to put attention on how to make bone broth, guess what? In a month, you're going to be really good at making bone broth. And so these are all things that you can learn. You can learn how to cut up a chicken. I mean, I can remember, you'll love this, Ashley. I'm old enough to remember when you could not go, imagine this, you could not go to a grocery store and buy boneless, skinless chicken breast. It didn't exist. If you wanted a boneless, skinless breast, you bought a chicken, you took it home, you took a knife and a cutting board, and you cut out the breast. Today, half of Americans don't know that a chicken has bones. They think we go out to the boneless, skinless breast tree, you know, and pick this stuff off like apples and pears. And we've lost that. But it's not hard to cut up a chicken. And that's the way to reduce your costs. The cost of this extra, you know, convenience, it's incredibly expensive. I'm still in shock that that Lunchables are $14 a pound. You can almost buy 2 pounds of our, you know, grass finished, world class, number one, unvaccinated, unmedicated, grass finished beef, ground beef, 2 pounds of it for 1 pound of a Lunchable, which is half bread. I mean, look, folks, this convenience is expensive. And so if you start using your kitchen, what we call domestic culinary arts, and when I call people to the domestic culinary arts, I'm not talking about slaving over the wood stove all day, going to the spring to bring a bucket of water. We, as a culture, we have never had such sophisticated, techno, glitzy, gadgetized kitchens and been more lost as to how to use our kitchens. We've got time bake, we've got hot and cold running water, refrigerators, ice makers, bread makers, ice cream makers, Instapot, Crockpot, blenders, slicers, mashers, dashers. We got everything you can imagine. It has never been easier in society, in history, at any time. It's never been easier to cook from scratch.
Joel, you're speaking my language. I also loved what you said about bone broth because I really wanted to learn how to make bone broth one day, and I went on this wild goose chase of I just got a bone and I went home and cooked it for like 4 hours and I was like, what? This isn't bone broth? So then I did so much research and now I'm the best bone broth maker. But I want to dive into, tell me why grass-fed meat is important.
So grass-fed, so think about this. Every biome, every you know, microbiome is unique and needs a wide variety of things. In fact, if you study what we're learning now as we connect the dots on human disease, lots of them are related to microbiome, and almost all of them, it starts with, well, you're missing something. You know, you're missing something in your microbiome. And so the beauty of grass-finished beef is that it ingests the greatest variety of plant material, and that diversity creates an incredible diversity of enzyme, you know, microbial, the whole microbial community, the microbiome is completely different in a grass-finished beef than it is a corn grain-finished beef. For example, it only takes 14 days of grain feeding to chase the conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, out of the body. Well, what's the important out of the cow? Well, what's the importance of CLA? CLA is what gives our synapses a whip, you know, springing, you know, electrical impulses, you know, they go across the synapses, and part of the flexibility of our synapses is tied in with CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. It's also the number one anti-carcinogen. And so, you know, for years we've heard, oh, red meat causes colon cancer, red meat causes colon cancer. Well, in Uruguay, their per capita consumption of red meat, are you ready for this? In the US, it's 52 pounds per capita per year. In Uruguay, it's almost 100 pounds per capita per year. That means the average Uruguayan eats almost a pound of red meat a day, and they have a third of the colon cancer rate of Americans.
Wow.
So if red meat causes colon cancer, they should be eaten up with colon cancer. Well, what's the difference? What's the difference is they don't feed grain to their cow. So they have high conjugated linoleic acid, which is a number one carcinogen fighting nutrient. So, the differences are profound. They're tasteable. They're measurable. You can measure them empirically. You can measure them with your taste buds, and your microbiome for sure understands the difference between a corn-fed beef, which we've never had until the last century, and a grass-finished beef, which has been the diet of humankind up until the last 100 years.
Joel, I want you to break this myth for me or give me a bit more insight. When I go to the grocery store and I buy grass-fed beef, I can buy Lifetime grass-fed or just regular grass-fed. What's the difference if it's not Lifetime grass-fed?
All right. So as you can imagine, the grass-fed beef movement has, it's become a marketing thing. I mean, people, it's become a thing. When things become a thing, they start ending up on labels and messaging and clever speaking and sales and stuff. And so the industry now, just so you know, the industry now says that if a cow eats one blade of grass in her lifetime, she's a grass-fed cow because she ate one blade of grass. That's how adulterous that's how adulterous the clever speak of the industry is. So when we say grass fattened or lifetime grass fed, that means it never had any grain, ever. And that's the distinction. And so you don't generally now I advise people, you don't want something that says grass fed because that's the new kind of natural. Well, what's natural? And so natural, I'm old enough to remember when the first thing was natural. Well, natural came to mean that it simply wasn't adulterated by other things. And then it was sustainable, and then it was organic, and now it's regenerative. And you have all these buzzwords, and what happens is every time one gets traction, the fraudulent side, the cheater side, glums onto it and tries to co-opt that terminology for their own marketing things. Organic has become a completely adulterated term. I mean, 96% of all organic meat in the U.S. is produced in a factory farm. They don't have to be outside on grass. They don't have to be. So we call our stuff pastured. We have a lot of pictures. We bring people out. I mean, goodness, I had a lady call me not long ago. She said, "Hey, I'm on this website and it says they're the farm to table conduit for homesteaders for small scale pastured chicken production." And she said, "Do you know about this company?" I said, "No, I don't, but I'll check them out." So she gave me the name. I jumped on the website and I pick up chickens. Let meet our chickens. And the homepage of their chicken website is a guy standing in front of 5 Tyson factory chicken houses. And I told the lady, I said, don't be lazy here. I mean, this is not rocket science. You don't have to look very hard to find out, is this true blue or not? But this is the kind of stuff. So when you're sleuthing, you can visit a farm, you can visit a website, you can contact somebody you trust, like the Weston A. Price Foundation or Moms Across America or Children's Health Defense Fund. I don't know. Me, okay. You can look at what resonates, what makes sense to you, and you become your own. You become your own food Sherlock Holmes. That's what we need is food Sherlock Holmes, and it's not that difficult. And again, you get more skillful with practice. Once you look at several websites, you start noticing patterns, and these people this and this and this. And so the whole idea of sleuthing provenance is a skill, just like driving, just like spelling, speaking, navigating podcasts. It's all a skill set. So again, you'll be successful at what you put attention on.
What kind of advice do you have for getting back in the kitchen and cooking with real food?
The first thing is to get single ingredient stuff. You know, you're not going to get canned squash. You're going to get a squash and you're going to peel it. You're not going to get a frozen apple pie. You're going to get apples and you're going to cook the apples in a pie with a crust that you make with lard and flour that you mix together. It takes so much time. It takes so much time. Well, what else are you going to do with your time? You're going to sit on TikTok for an hour? You know, that's what most people do with their time. And so again, this is not about saving time. It's about saving your life. How important is that? And so investing a little bit in your own provenance. I mean, listen, for us, and Teresa and I are Crockpot addicts. I mean, we give Crockpots for wedding gifts. I mean, we think it's the ultimate convenience. You go to the freezer, you go out, you get some potatoes, you get some carrots, you get some onions, you get a hunk of meat, you throw it in the crock pot, and for 40 watts, that's less than a light bulb all day, just sits there and bubbles all day. And if you want to eat at 4, it's ready. If you want to eat at 5, it's ready. If you're late and you don't eat until 8, it's ready, and it's not burned and it's not dry and it's just fine. I mean, and you can put it in frozen and it just bubbles all day. You don't even have to look at it. And if you have a cute crock pot, you can use that as a serving dish and you don't even dirty up another serving dish. There is nothing more convenient than a crock pot meal.
I love that. I love the wisdom that you're sharing. And I have to tell you my story. When I first moved to Australia, I wanted to make a pumpkin pie, but they don't have canned pumpkin in Australia. It doesn't exist. So I had to find a real pumpkin and I put it in the crock pot, I think is how I cooked it. So it was nice and mushy like canned. And Joel, it was the best pumpkin pie I've ever had.
Of course, food never gets better over time. There's nothing you can do to freezing, canning, anything. Well, I don't know, maybe fermentation. It gets better over time. You know, wine, sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles. But you know, as far as normal stuff, it never gets better over time. It gets worse over time.
Tell me a little bit about fermenting. I have tried fermenting my own, I think it was something like kimchi. I had cabbage and a lemon and it ended up growing mold, so I didn't make it again. But tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I mean, I'm not the cook at our house. Teresa's she's the guru. But I mean, we've always made sauerkraut. We've got a big crock, a big crock. I don't know what it's 10 gallons or so. And we do sauerkraut in there. You just, shred your cabbage, put it in, put a nice big plate on top with a rock, so that it stays submerged in the juices. And I don't know how many days she does it, but I mean, I don't know. All I know is sauerkraut comes out. We do a lot of pickles. My favorite, my joke for her is that I married her because of her sweet pickles. So the story there is I was a kid, I was a teenager, and I was selling my eggs and stuff down at the curb market, kind of a precursor to today's farmer's market. And one of the other vendors there was an elderly lady. She was a grandma, and she made potato salad with sweet pickles in it. And I'd never had sweet pickles. My mom would make bread and butter pickles and tried to make dill pickles, but they were never crunchy. They were always real soft, never like dill pickles. Bread and butters were fine, but these sweet pickles, oh my goodness, crunchy and sweet. And I mean, it was just like nirvana for me. All right, so I get acquainted with these sweet pickles, and then Teresa and I were high school sweethearts. She's 15, I'm 16, and I finally get invited over to a family Christmas dinner, with the fam, right? And so I go up there. I go over to her. That's their grandmother's house. All the cousins are there. Everybody's there, and I go through the buffet line, and there in a tray, not even part of a potato salad, but in a tray are sweet pickles. And I tell her to this day, the moment I got one of those, I said, I'm marrying this girl. And we married about 7 years later after college.
So much. I love your stories. I love speaking with you. I have so many more questions, but I ask all my guests the same closing question, which is, what haven't I asked you that you'd like my listeners to know?
What haven't you asked me I'd like them to know? So probably the single most, the one I would say on this one is, why is it so hard to get good food? Why isn't good food more available? Why do I have to, well, why is it just difficult to get good food? And why is it so expensive? And so the answer to that is that we have a scale prejudicial food regulatory bureaucracy in this country that makes it easier to comply with food regulations if you're large than if you're small. And so that creates an inordinate price prejudice against small producers, and it denies many of us market opportunities for competitive foods to the industrial food base. It denies us market capacity because it's so hard to pass the licensing, compliance, all these things that are necessary to be able to access our neighbors with food. So what I'm promoting in our country is a food emancipation proclamation to free up our food system so that if two neighbors want to engage in a food transaction, they don't need permission from the government to do so. And if we had that kind of freedom to interact in our foods, in our food acquisition and provenance, it would fundamentally open up the competitive pricing and the competitive availability of local neighborhood, instead of having to almost go into a clandestine guerrilla transaction in the dark alley at midnight to get a glass of raw milk or get a package of homemade charcuterie.
I was going to say, you hit the nail on the head with that raw milk. I feel like I'm always, being watched if I want to shop for raw milk.
Right. You get along better trying to get cocaine and methamphetamine than raw milk.
Well, there's so many weed shops on every corner, right? There's all these horrible things for us just at our convenience.
Yeah, Coca-Cola. You can feed your kid four cans of Coca-Cola a day. That's perfectly safe, but 1 teaspoon of raw milk, that's deadly. I mean, we have come to a nutso place. And so the Food Emancipation Proclamation would simply say that if two people want to engage in a food transaction, they don't need the permission of the government, period. I'm not saying that we could send it to Walmart or Costco or ship it to Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. I'm saying if you want to come to my farm as voluntary consenting adult to exercise freedom of choice and give your microbiome its own agency, those are all powerful phrases. You should be able to do so. We've got freedom of choice in the womb. We've got choice in the bathroom, choice in the bedroom. We don't have choice in the kitchen. And that's ridiculous.
How can we get involved, Joel? How can we help make a change?
Well, probably right now it would be just pay attention to my blog, Musings of the Lunatic Farmer, and I am just kind of keeping people up to date on this effort, basically. And actually, I'm getting some traction on it. And I just spent an hour last week talking with some of the mucks at the Small Business Administration, and they're all into this. They say, send us the material, we want to do this. And so, I'm really getting, I think our country has reached the stomach turning point. We're done with it. We're sick, we're unhealthy, and food freedom, food choice, people are realizing is the next frontier in breaking down the shackles of the pharmaceutical agri-industrial complex. And so that's our next front in the basic health and wellness war, which you are a wonderful heroine in that space, and I thank you.
Oh, well, I thank you. I love the term food freedom. I love that so much. Joel, please tell my listeners where they can go to learn more about you.
So our website is Polyface Farms, Polyface. I don't have a personal, I'm not on Snapchat, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on X, I don't even have a smartphone, okay? But Polyface Farms is our farm, and it's a very eclectic thing. You can get my blog. We do a podcast once a week, and we ship nationwide. So if you're wanting to get something good, we ship nationwide. And yeah, it's all there on Polyface, Polyface.
Joel, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening today. A quick shout out on Instagram or sharing this podcast with a friend can make a positive difference. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, a great way to support the show is by leaving me a review. You can also support my work by using any of the affiliate links in my show notes or by visiting my website, ashleydaily.com. This podcast is presented for educational and exploratory purposes only. The published content is not intended to be used for diagnosing or treating any illnesses, diseases, or disorders. Those responsible for this show disclaim any responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of this information presented by myself or my guests. Please consult with your healthcare provider before using any products or services referenced in this podcast. The content here is for informational purposes only. Episodes on the Welcome to Wellness podcast may at times cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to depression, suicide, 5G, nootropics, circumcision, birth control, the Women's Health Initiative, the use of plants medicine, abortion, geoengineering, terrorism, gender, AI, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You are advised to refrain from listening to this podcast if you are likely to be offended or adversely impacted by any of these topics. However, if these topics interest you, you just may have found your tribe. The information or opinions expressed on the Welcome to Wellness show are solely the views of the individuals involved and by no means represent absolute facts. Opinions expressed by the host and the guests can change at any time. The views of my guests are solely their views, and the Welcome to Wellness show does not accept responsibility for them. Any action you take based on the information contained within this show is strictly at your own risk. The Welcome to Wellness host, Ashley Daly, will not be liable for any losses or damages in connection with the use of this podcast. You should take all necessary steps to ascertain the information you receive in this podcast is correct and has been verified. None of the guests or contributors on the Welcome to Wellness podcast will be responsible for your use of the information contained therein. Under no circumstances will the Welcome to Wellness show or my affiliates, partners, suppliers, licenses, or guests appearing on the show be liable for any direct or indirect consequences or damages arising from your ability or inability to access this podcast. All intellectual property rights belong to me, Ashley Daly, and include but are not limited to the copyright and any other rights in the design. You are permitted to use the Welcome to Wellness podcast for personal use but not commercial use without a license. You may not make recordings. If you breach these terms, you lose the right to access the Welcome to Wellness podcast, and you must destroy or return any copies of the recordings you've made. Guests on the Welcome to Wellness podcast may at times provide information on or read extracts from third-party copyrighted work. The Welcome to Wellness podcast does not provide any medical or professional advice within these episodes. If you take any action or inaction as a result of the content you consume from the Welcome to Wellness podcast, this is based solely on your decision, and the Welcome to Wellness podcast, Ashley Daly, and my guests cannot be held responsible or liable for any of the consequences of such action or inaction. Thank you for listening.